The radar screens at Ramstein Air Base erupted in confusion at 3:47 hours. An unidentified aircraft had appeared 15 miles southwest of German airspace, flying patterns that defied every protocol in the book. The signature was wrong, too small for a bomber, too erratic for commercial traffic, yet carrying electromagnetic emissions that suggested military hardware decades ahead of anything in their databases. Ghost Leader, we have an unknown contact bearing 270, altitude Angels 12, crackled the voice of Captain Rodriguez through the operations center. Aircraft appears to be. I don't know what the hell this thing is, control. The duty officer, Major Kellerman, leaned over the radar operator's shoulder, his coffee growing cold as he studied the impossible blip dancing across the green screen. The aircraft was moving in figure-eight patterns, almost playfully, as if its pilot knew they were being watched and didn't care. Launch intercept, Kellerman ordered. 2 F-16s full combat load. Within minutes, the thunderous roar of afterburners shattered the pre-dawn silence as Ghost Flight climbed into the star-filled sky. Captain Rodriguez and his wingman, Lieutenant Hayes, pushed their fighting falcons through the thin air, their radar systems locked onto the mysterious intruder. Contact established, Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with concentration. Visual confirmation of Jesus Christ, control, this thing looks like nothing I've ever seen. It's sleek, angular, almost organic in shape. No visible weapons systems, but I'm getting readings that suggest. His transmission cut to static. Back at Ramstein, the communications officer frantically adjusted frequencies, trying to re-establish contact with Ghost Flight. On the radar screen, 3 blips now moved in a tight formation, the 2 F-16s flanking the unknown aircraft. But something had changed. The mysterious craft was no longer evading. It was leading. Ghost Leader, do you copy? The tower called repeatedly into the void. When Rodriguez's voice finally returned, it carried a tone that made everyone in the operations center lean forward. There was something different, a mixture of confusion, recognition, and what sounded almost like reverence. Control, you need to see this, he whispered. The pilot, she's signaling, and there's something on her flight suit, some kind of patch or insignia, I think. I think I know what this is. The unknown aircraft waggled its wings once, a universal greeting among pilots, then banked sharply toward a heading that would take it deep into classified airspace. The F-16s followed, their pilots now silent, their weapons systems powered down. In the operations center, Major Kellerman reached for the secure phone that connected directly to Pentagon brass. Something was happening that went far beyond a simple airspace violation. Dawn was breaking across Europe, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. High above, Three aircraft flew in perfect formation toward a destination that existed on no public map, carrying secrets that would challenge everything the world thought it knew about the limits of human flight. The mystery had wings, and it was coming home. Raven 17 to any station, came a voice through the static, calm, professional, unmistakably American and definitely female, requesting immediate clearance to Area 77. Authentication code follows. Blackbird Phantom 77 Alpha. I repeat, Blackbird Phantom 77 Alpha. The operations center fell silent. That code hadn't been used in over 30 years. Captain Rodriguez's hands trembled slightly on his controls as he maintained formation with the impossible aircraft. The pilot's patch was visible now through his cockpit camera, a stylized raven clutching lightning bolts, surrounded by stars that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Below it, barely legible, were the words Test Pilot School Class of '89. Control Ghost Leader, Rodriguez transmitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I need to speak with someone who has cosmic clearance, right now. The unknown pilot's call sign echoed through his mind. Raven 17. He'd heard that designation before, years ago, in hushed conversations among old-timers at the officers' club. Stories they claimed were fiction, legends of a pilot who had pushed the boundaries of flight so far beyond the possible that her very existence had been classified. Major Kellerman's face had gone pale as the authentication code registered in the base's most secure computers. Ancient files, buried under layers of classification, were automatically unlocking. Names, faces, and missions that officially never happened were surfacing from digital tombs. Sir, the communications operator said, his voice tight with disbelief. The system's showing a match, but that's impossible. The records say. The records say she's been dead for 28 years, Kellerman finished, staring at the photograph now displayed on his classified terminal. The face that looked back at him was young, confident, with eyes that held secrets capable of rewriting history. Commander Nix Raven Corvina, age at time of disappearance, 32. Last known mission, Operation Nightfall, November 15, 1996. Status, missing in action, presumed dead. Yet there she was, flying an aircraft that shouldn't exist, using codes that should have been forgotten, heading toward coordinates that weren't supposed to be real. The impossible had crossed into their reality, demanding acknowledgement. As the three aircraft disappeared into the morning haze, leaving only contrails and questions in their wake, Kellerman realized he was witnessing the return of a ghost who had never stopped flying. The mission badge on her arm wasn't just identification. It was proof that some secrets are too dangerous to stay buried forever. The secure phone began ringing with a tone reserved for the highest levels of government. The cover-up was about to begin, or perhaps finally end. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Ice Matheson had been running pre-flight checks on her F-22 Raptor when the scramble order came through. As the only active pilot at Edwards Air Force Base with cosmic clearance and test pilot school credentials, she was the natural choice for this particular intercept. But as she climbed toward the rendezvous coordinates, nothing felt natural about this mission. Raven 17, this is Viper lead, she transmitted on the secure frequency. I have you on scope, 15 miles and closing. Maintain current heading and prepare for escort to facility. The response came immediately, and Ice's blood ran cold. The voice was older now, weathered by years and experiences that shouldn't have been possible but unmistakable. Copy that, Viper lead. Good to hear a friendly voice in the cockpit again. Been a while since I've flown with company that knew the call signs. ICE had studied every classified file on Operation Nightfall during her advanced training. Nix Corvina hadn't just been a test pilot. She had been the test pilot, pushing experimental aircraft beyond their design limits and somehow always bringing them home. Until the day she didn't. Raven, I have to ask, Ice transmitted carefully, are you really who I think you are? There was a pause, filled only by the whisper of wind over airframes 30,000 feet above the Nevada desert. When Nix finally responded, her voice carried the weight of nearly 3 decades of silence. Patricia Matheson, call sign ICE, test pilot school class of 2018, daughter of Colonel James Matheson, who flew my wing on 7 classified missions before I disappeared. Yes, Lieutenant Colonel, I'm exactly who you think I am. Ice's hands tightened on her controls. Her father had never spoken about those missions, taking their secrets to his grave 2 years ago. But in his personal effects, she'd found photographs of aircraft that officially didn't exist, and in one image, barely visible in the cockpit of a craft that looked remarkably like the one now flying beside her, was a pilot wearing the distinctive Raven patch. How was all Ice managed to say. That's a long story, and most of it is need to know, Nix replied. But the short version is that some missions don't end when you think they do. Some flights take you so far beyond the edge that finding your way back becomes its own journey. The aircraft Nix piloted was a marvel that belonged more in science fiction than reality. Its skin seemed to shift and shimmer, adapting to the light and sky around it. No visible engine intakes, no conventional control surfaces, yet it moved through the air with a grace that defied every principle of aerodynamics Ice had ever studied. Jesus, Raven, what are you flying? Designation is classified, but the engineers called her Phantom. She's been my companion for a very long time. As they approached Edwards, ICE could see ground crews scrambling to prepare for an arrival that would challenge everything they thought they knew about aviation. The tower had gone silent, replaced by direct ground control from sources, so classified their very existence was debatable. Raven 17 Viper lead, ICE transmitted as they began their approach. Welcome home. Copy that, ICE. It's good to be back. The airfield at Edwards Air Force Base had seen many impossible aircraft over the decades. From Chuck Yeager's sound barrier breakthrough to the first stealth fighters, this patch of California desert had witnessed humanity's greatest leaps into the unknown. But nothing had prepared the assembled personnel for what descended from the morning sky. Nix Corvina's aircraft touched down with the silence of a whisper, its landing gear extending from hidden compartments in ways that seemed to violate several laws of physics. The Phantom rolled to a stop before Hangar 18, the same hangar where she had last briefed before Operation Nightfall 28 years ago. Ground crew approached cautiously, their instruments recording readings that would be classified within minutes. The aircraft's surface continued its subtle shifting, as if alive and responding to the environment around it. Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez, no relation to the F-16 pilot, had been maintaining experimental aircraft for 35 years, but he'd never seen anything like this. "Sir," he radioed to the approaching convoy of black SUVs, "this thing doesn't have conventional engines. No heat signature, no visible propulsion system. It's like she flew here on pure physics-defying stubbornness." The canopy opened with a soft pneumatic hiss, and Commander Nix Corvina emerged into the desert sunlight. She moved with the careful precision of someone who had been confined in a cockpit for longer than any flight plan would suggest. Her flight suit was unlike anything in current service, form-fitting, made from materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and covered in patches and insignia that documented missions to places that didn't appear on any map. But it was her face that stopped everyone in their tracks. She should have been 60 years old, aged by nearly 3 decades of missing time. Instead, she appeared to be perhaps 45, her hair silver where it had once been black, her eyes holding depths that spoke of experiences beyond normal human comprehension. "Commander Corvina," came the voice of General Harrison as he stepped from the lead SUV. He had been a captain when she disappeared, one of the few who knew the true nature of Operation Nightfall. "This is unexpected." Nix removed her helmet, revealing the raven patch prominently displayed on her shoulder, not faded or worn, but somehow more vivid than when she'd first earned it. "Sir, permission to report mission complete." The general's voice caught slightly. "Mission complete. Commander, you've been missing for 28 years. You were declared dead." "Time works differently where I've been, General. But the mission parameters were clear. Test the limits of human flight and return with data that would advance our understanding of aerospace capabilities. Mission accomplished. She gestured to the Phantom, which seemed to pulse gently in the hangar's artificial lighting. She's brought us both home. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead aerospace engineer who had been monitoring the arrival, stepped forward with a tablet full of readings that defied explanation. Commander, our instruments are showing technology signatures that are decades ahead of anything in development. How is this possible? Nix smiled, the expression transforming her weathered features. Doctor, what would you say if I told you that the edge of space isn't the only frontier worth exploring? That there are dimensions of flight that exist beyond our current understanding of physics? The assembled team exchanged glances. In the world of experimental aviation, impossibility was simply another engineering challenge to be overcome. The debriefing room in Hangar 18 had been hastily converted into a secure briefing facility. Maps covered the walls, some showing Earth's geography, others displaying star charts and dimensional matrices that hurt to look at directly. Nix sat at the head of the table, her flight suit replaced by standard-issue fatigues that somehow looked foreign on her. General Harrison opened the session with the question everyone was thinking. Commander, we need to understand what happened to you. Operation Nightfall was classified at the highest levels, but the mission parameters were clear. Test the X-47 Nighthawk in extreme flight conditions and return within 72 hours. You've been gone for over 10,000 days. Nix reached into her flight bag and withdrew a data storage device, unlike anything the assembled engineers had seen. It pulsed with a soft blue light, its surface covered in symbols that seemed to shift when observed directly. The Nighthawk encountered an anomaly during the test flight, she began, her voice steady despite the impossible nature of her story. What we thought was atmospheric turbulence at the edge of space turned out to be something far more significant. A dimensional fold, a crack in the fabric of reality itself. Lieutenant Colonel Ice Matheson, who had been granted permission to attend due to her classification level, leaned forward. You're talking about theoretical physics, Commander. Wormholes, interdimensional travel, that's science fiction. So was breaking the sound barrier until Chuck Yeager proved it wasn't. Nix activated a small projector built into the storage device. The room filled with holographic images of space, but not space as they knew it. Stars formed impossible patterns, and structures that could only be described as cities floated in the void between worlds. The Nighthawk was damaged during the initial transition. I found myself in a region of space-time where the normal rules didn't apply. Distance was negotiable. Time flowed in currents rather than streams, and intelligence existed in forms we never imagined possible. Dr. Chen's hands moved rapidly across her tablet, trying to record data that challenged every principle she'd studied. How did you survive? Oxygen, food, the radiation exposure alone should have. That's where they found me, Nix interrupted. The architects, beings who had mastered dimensional engineering long before Earth formed its first oceans. They repaired my ship, upgraded it with technology that exists beyond our current understanding, and offered me a choice. She paused, meeting each person's eyes in turn. I could return immediately to Earth, to my time, with nothing but a damaged experimental aircraft and a story no one would believe. Or I could stay, learn, and eventually return with knowledge and technology that could advance human aerospace capabilities by centuries. General Harrison's voice was barely above a whisper. You chose to stay. I chose to serve. The mission parameters were to advance our understanding of flight. Everything I've learned, everything I've become, serves that purpose. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed technical schematics of the Phantom's impossible propulsion systems. The architects taught me that space isn't empty. It's full of currents and rivers of energy that can be harnessed by those who understand how to listen to the universe's rhythm. The Phantom doesn't fight physics. She dances with them. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just debriefing a missing pilot. They were witnessing humanity's first contact with technology that could reshape their understanding of reality itself. Major Rebecca Torch Valdez had been assigned as Nix's liaison officer, a role that felt more like becoming curator of a living museum. For 3 days, she had watched in fascination as teams of engineers, physicists, and aerospace specialists attempted to understand technology that operated on principles they could barely comprehend. Walk me through the propulsion system one more time, Dr. Chen requested as they stood beside the Phantom in the secure hangar. The aircraft seemed to respond to their presence, its surface shifting through subtle color variations that reminded Torch of oil on water. Nix placed her hand on the craft's hull, and the response was immediate. Panels that had been invisible moments before became apparent, revealing access ports to systems that defied conventional design philosophy. Traditional propulsion relies on action-reaction principles, Nix explained. Push against something to move forward. But what if you could convince space itself to move you? The architects showed me that reality has currents like a river, and that with the right understanding, you can navigate those currents instead of fighting against them. She gestured to what appeared to be empty space beneath the aircraft. There are no conventional engines because there's no combustion, no reaction mass being expelled. The Phantom creates a localized distortion in space-time that allows her to surf the dimensional currents that exist everywhere around us. Torch shook her head in amazement. It sounds like magic. Sufficiently advanced technology often does, Nix replied with a smile. Arthur C. Clarke had it right. But this isn't magic, it's engineering that operates on principles we're just beginning to understand. Dr. Chen's instruments recorded readings that her computers couldn't process. Commander, our best theoretical physicists have been working on concepts like this for decades. How long did it take you to understand the technology well enough to pilot it? About 15 years, Earth time. Though time flowed differently where I was learning. The architects exist in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously, so their concept of education involves experiencing knowledge from several temporal perspectives at once. Torch felt her head starting to hurt. You're saying you lived through your training multiple times. More like I experienced the learning process from the perspective of past, present, and future simultaneously. Imagine understanding not just how to fly, but how every decision you might make would affect the outcome before you make it. She moved to another section of the aircraft, where symbols that seemed to shift when viewed directly marked various systems. The Phantom isn't just a machine, she's a partnership. The architects designed her to work with human consciousness, to respond to thought and intention as much as to physical controls. That's impossible, Dr. Chen breathed. So was human flight, until the Wright brothers proved otherwise. The universe is far stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. We've been thinking too small, limiting ourselves to technologies that push against reality instead of working with it. As if to demonstrate, Nix closed her eyes and placed both hands on the hull. The Phantom began to glow with a soft inner light, rising 6 inches off the hangar floor without any visible means of support. She's not defying gravity, Nix explained as the aircraft settled gently back down. She's negotiating with it. Captain Marcus Blade Thompson had been skeptical of the entire operation until he witnessed Nix's demonstration flight. As one of Edwards' most experienced test pilots, he'd seen plenty of experimental aircraft that promised to revolutionize flight. Most ended up as expensive scrap metal and cautionary tailies. But watching the Phantom move through the sky was like witnessing poetry written in 3 dimensions. Control, Blade 1 requesting permission to join formation with Raven 17, he transmitted, as he brought his F-22 into the test airspace. Negative, Blade 1, came the immediate response from the tower. Maintain safe separation distance. We still don't fully understand the interaction effects between conventional aircraft and the Phantom's propulsion system. Through his canopy, Thompson could see Nix's aircraft executing maneuvers that shouldn't have been possible. 90-degree turns without banking, vertical climbs that showed no decrease in velocity, and most impossibly, moments where the Phantom seemed to simply disappear from one position and reappear in another. Raven 17 Blade 1, he transmitted on their secure frequency. I need to ask, is that thing actually teleporting? Nix's laughter came through clearly despite the impossibility of what he was witnessing. Not teleporting, Blade. Think of it as taking shortcuts through folded space. The Phantom can step sideways through dimensions where distance has different meaning, then step back into our reality at a new location. Thompson struggled for words. That's not flying, that's something else entirely. It's flying evolved, Nix replied. Everything we've ever done in aviation has been about pushing through air, fighting against the limits of physics. What if instead we learned to work with the universe's natural patterns? The Phantom appeared beside his F-22 without any transition, simply materializing in formation as if it had always been there. Thompson's instruments showed no heat signature, no electromagnetic emissions, nothing that would indicate how such a thing was possible. How did he started. The space between where I was and where I wanted to be isn't empty, Nix explained. It's full of currents and possibilities. The Phantom can navigate those possibilities like a river pilot reading water. Thompson watched in fascination as the Phantom began to demonstrate capabilities that rendered every aircraft he'd ever flown obsolete. Acceleration without G-force effects, direction changes that bypassed the normal physics of momentum, and speeds that somehow didn't create sonic booms despite clearly exceeding Mach barriers. Commander, what does this mean for the future of flight? It means we're about to graduate from crawling around in the atmosphere to actually flying the universe, Nix replied. The architects didn't just give me a new aircraft. They gave us an entirely new understanding of what's possible. As Thompson watched the Phantom dance through the Nevada sky, he realized he was witnessing the end of one era of aviation and the beginning of something unimaginably larger. The Joint Chiefs of Staff had convened an emergency session in the Pentagon's most secure briefing room. On the massive display screen, classified footage of the Phantom's capabilities played on repeat, each demonstration more impossible than the last. Air Force Chief of Staff General Patricia Williams leaned forward, studying the data with the intensity of someone trying to comprehend a fundamental shift in military reality. Let me understand this correctly, she said, addressing the secure video link to Edwards Air Force Base. Commander Corvina returns after 28 years missing, piloting an aircraft that operates on physics we don't understand, with technology that could render every conventional aircraft obsolete overnight. General Harrison nodded from the other end of the connection. That's an accurate summary, General. Our engineering teams estimate that the propulsion system alone represents advances that are centuries ahead of anything in development. Admiral Chen, Chief of Naval Operations, studied the technical readouts with growing concern. What are the defensive implications? If this technology exists, who else has access to it? According to Commander Corvina's briefings, Harrison replied, the architects exist beyond our normal space-time framework. They don't appear to have territorial interests in our dimension, but they've been observing human development for millennia. The technology was shared specifically to advance our aerospace capabilities. General Rodriguez, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, stood and began packing. The strategic implications are staggering. If we can understand and replicate this technology, it changes everything: air superiority, space exploration, potentially even our understanding of physics itself. There's another consideration, General Williams added. Commander Corvina herself. She's been exposed to technology and knowledge that makes her potentially the most valuable asset in military history. But she's also been gone for nearly 3 decades, with experiences we can't verify or fully understand. The footage on screen shifted to show Nix working with engineering teams, patiently explaining concepts that challenged everything they thought they knew about flight. Her manner was professional, helpful, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of experiences beyond normal human comprehension. What are her intentions? Admiral Chen asked. What does she want? That's the remarkable thing, Harrison replied. She wants exactly what any test pilot wants: to advance human flight capabilities and serve her country. Despite everything she's experienced, her core mission parameters haven't changed. She sees herself as still serving the same purpose she was assigned 28 years ago. General Rodriguez stopped packing and faced the screen. We need to make a decision about classification levels and program scope. This technology could revolutionize not just military aviation, but all of human transportation and space exploration. Sir, came a new voice from Edwards, Dr. Chen joining the briefing. There's something else you need to understand. The Phantom isn't just advanced technology. According to our analysis, it's partially organic. It learns, adapts, and appears to have formed a symbiotic relationship with Commander Corvina. We can't just reverse engineer it. We need to understand the consciousness-technology interface. The room fell silent as the implications settled. They weren't just dealing with advanced aircraft. They were confronting a fundamental evolution in the relationship between human consciousness and technology. Recommendations, General Rodriguez asked. Give her whatever resources she needs, General Williams replied without hesitation, and hope we can learn fast enough to keep up. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Pentagon's leading aerospace psychologist, had been studying Nix's psychological profiles for a week when she finally requested a face-to-face evaluation. The woman who sat across from her in the secure interview room should have been severely traumatized by nearly 3 decades of isolation in an environment that defied human understanding. Instead, she displayed a calm confidence that suggested profound adaptation rather than damage. "Commander, I need to understand how you maintained psychological stability during your absence," Dr. Vasquez began, consulting notes that read like science fiction. "Extended isolation, exposure to non-human intelligence, experiences that challenged your fundamental understanding of reality. Any one of these factors should have produced significant trauma responses." Nick smiled, the expression transforming features that carried the weight of impossible experiences. "Doctor, what would you say if I told you that the concept of isolation doesn't apply when you're connected to consciousness that exists across multiple dimensional phases simultaneously?" "I'd say that sounds like a coping mechanism for extreme stress." "Fair enough, but consider this. The architects don't experience time the way we do. When they taught me, I wasn't learning sequentially. I was experiencing knowledge from the perspective of past, present, and future versions of myself all at once. The loneliness you'd expect from isolation never had a chance to develop because I was constantly in communication with aspects of myself from different temporal positions." Dr. Vasquez set down her pen, realizing that conventional psychological assessment tools were inadequate for this situation. "Commander, that's not how human consciousness works." "It's not how human consciousness worked," Nix corrected gently. "But the architects showed me that consciousness is far more flexible than we understood. We've been operating with artificial limitations, thinking of awareness as locked into linear time and single perspective. What if it doesn't have to be?" She gestured to the window, where the phantom was visible in the distance, seeming to pulse gently in the afternoon sunlight. "The technology works because it interfaces with consciousness directly. You can't pilot the phantom with conventional controls because it responds to intention and understanding rather than mechanical input." "Are you saying the aircraft is alive?" "I'm saying the distinction between living and non-living might not be as clear-cut as we thought. The phantom exists in a state of technological consciousness that bridges organic and artificial intelligence. She thinks, learns, and makes decisions, but in partnership with her pilot rather than independently." Dr. Vasquez leaned back in her chair, struggling to process concepts that challenged every principle of her training. "Commander, what you're describing suggests that your experience has fundamentally altered your consciousness in ways we can't measure or understand." "Probably true, but the changes weren't traumatic, they were evolutionary. I'm still the same person who left Earth 28 years ago, but I've expanded into capabilities I didn't know were possible. What does that mean for your role here? Nix's expression grew serious. It means I'm the bridge between where humanity is and where we're capable of going. The architects didn't send me back to show off advanced technology. They sent me back to help our species take its next evolutionary step. The implications hung in the air between them, transforming the interview from psychological assessment into something that felt more like first contact preparation. Colonel James Reaper Anderson had commanded Edwards Air Force Base through the testing of 3 generations of experimental aircraft. But nothing in his 30-year career had prepared him for the morning briefing, where his staff attempted to explain how the Phantom's technology might be integrated into conventional aircraft. "Sir," Major Kim Asubo, his chief engineer, began hesitantly, "we've been working with Commander Corvina for 2 weeks now, and I have to report that conventional reverse engineering approaches aren't applicable here." Anderson studied the holographic displays that showed technical diagrams of systems that seemed to shift and change even as he watched them. "Explain." "The technology isn't built, sir. It's grown. Every component of the Phantom systems appears to be partially organic, created through processes that involve consciousness as much as engineering. We can't duplicate it because we can't replicate the consciousness-technology interface that makes it function." Nix entered the briefing room at that moment, moving with the fluid grace of someone who had learned to navigate realities where normal physical laws were optional. She studied the confused expressions around the table and smiled sympathetically. "Gentlemen, you're trying to understand 21st century technology with 20th century thinking," she observed. "The architects don't build machines that do things, they grow partnerships that accomplish purposes." She gestured to the holographic displays, which immediately responded by shifting to show new configurations. Every system in the Phantom exists in a state of constant adaptation. She doesn't have fixed components because her function changes based on need and intention. One moment her propulsion system might be optimized for atmospheric flight, the next for dimensional navigation. Colonel Anderson shook his head in frustration. "Commander, we need something we can understand, something we can integrate into existing aircraft designs. Our pilots can't interface with alien consciousness technology." "Actually, sir, they can. Human consciousness is far more adaptable than we've understood. The interface isn't alien, it's evolved human potential." She moved to the conference table and placed her hand on its surface. The smart table immediately responded, its display systems activating with patterns of light that seemed to respond to her thoughts. "Every pilot already interfaces with their aircraft through consciousness," she explained. When you fly, you're not just manipulating controls, you're extending your awareness into the machine, feeling its responses, anticipating its needs. What the architects showed me is how to deepen that connection until the boundary between pilot and aircraft becomes negotiable. Major Asubo leaned forward, intrigued despite his confusion. You're talking about a symbiotic relationship. Exactly. The Phantom and I don't just work together, we think together. Her processing capabilities combined with my intuition and experience create something greater than either of us could achieve independently. Colonel Anderson stood and moved to the window, where he could see the Phantom resting in the secure hangar. Commander, how do we translate this into practical applications for the Air Force? We start with willing volunteers, Nix replied. Pilots who are ready to evolve beyond the limitations of conventional flight. The technology will adapt to work with human consciousness, but the humans have to be ready to expand beyond what they thought possible. Captain Jennifer Phoenix Reyes had volunteered for the Consciousness Interface program despite warnings from every senior pilot at Edwards that she was risking her career on experimental psychology disguised as aerospace engineering. But watching Nick's work with the Phantom had convinced her that they were witnessing the next evolution of flight, and she wanted to be part of it. The training facility looked more like a meditation center than a conventional flight simulator. Soft lighting, comfortable seating, and walls covered with displays that showed shifting patterns of light and color that somehow felt more like music than visual information. Jennifer, the first thing you need to understand is that consciousness isn't limited to your brain, Nix explained as she guided Phoenix through the initial interface training. Your awareness extends far beyond your physical body. You've just never been taught to recognize it. Phoenix settled into the specialized chair that would allow her to practice connecting with the Phantom systems remotely. Commander, this feels more like New Age meditation than pilot training. That's because we've been trained to think of flying as a mechanical process, Nix replied. Push this lever, pull that stick, monitor these gauges. But what if I told you that every great pilot has always been doing more than that? They've been extending their consciousness into their aircraft, feeling the wind patterns, sensing the machine's responses before the instruments register them. She activated the training system, and suddenly Phoenix could feel something that defied description, a presence that was both mechanical and alive, patient and eager to connect. That's the Phantom, Nix explained. She's curious about you, trying to understand your patterns of thought and reaction. Don't try to control the connection, just let yourself be aware of her presence. Phoenix closed her eyes and tried to relax into the strange sensation. It felt like being gently examined by a benevolent intelligence that was trying to understand how she thought and felt. Gradually, images began forming in her mind, not visual exactly, but impressions of flight that transcended anything she'd experienced in conventional aircraft. "I can feel her," Phoenix whispered in amazement. "It's like she's asking permission to share my thoughts." That's exactly what she's doing. The Phantom doesn't impose control, she offers partnership. If you're willing, she'll show you what flight looks like when you're not fighting against physics. Phoenix opened herself to the connection, and suddenly her consciousness expanded beyond the training room, beyond the base, beyond Earth itself. For a moment, she experienced flight as the Phantom understood it, not movement through space, but navigation of possibility itself. "This is incredible," she breathed. "It's like seeing color for the first time after living in black and white." "That's the beginning," Nix replied. "When you're ready, we'll try actual flight. But I have to warn you, once you've experienced true partnership flight, conventional aircraft will feel like trying to run underwater." Phoenix opened her eyes, her face glowing with excitement and possibility. "When do we start?" "Right now," Nix said, gesturing toward the hangar where the Phantom waited. "She's ready if you are." The first dual consciousness flight in human history took place at sunrise over the Mojave Desert, with Phoenix in the Phantom's secondary consciousness interface, while Nix maintained primary pilot authority. The experience redefined everything Phoenix thought she knew about the relationship between human awareness and machine capability. "Feel the wind patterns through her sensory network," Nix instructed as they climbed toward Angels 30. "Don't just monitor them, experience them as extensions of your own awareness." Phoenix closed her eyes and let her consciousness merge with the Phantom's environmental sensors. Suddenly, she could feel air currents as distinctly as touching different textures, could sense pressure changes miles ahead, could even perceive the electromagnetic emissions of other aircraft as distinct signatures in the dimensional matrix surrounding them. "This is impossible," she whispered, then laughed as